Young man, take a look at me now.
This segment is brought to you in part by Swim Baits Plus. Are you looking for that hard-to-find swim bait? Are you looking for that impossible rare color? Are you looking for great prices? Visit them on Instagram at @SwimBaitsPlus. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bass Who Anglers podcast. Our guest today has been fishing professionally since 2005, where she was a founding player in the Women's Bassmaster Tour. In 2010, she became a regular at BASS Open events and has fished every region, Central, Southern, Eastern, and Northern in the years since then. She's established herself as a versatile angler, finishing 8th in a Toyota Series event on the Potomac River, 4th in a BASS Open event at Douglas Lake, and just recently finishing 26th place at the BASS Northern Open on the James River. Christina Bradley, welcome to the Bass Who Anglers podcast. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Your tour success has come in a lot of different waterways. The Potomac is tidal driven. Douglas is a mountain impoundment, and the James River is more of a traditional river system. Let's talk about your versatility as an angler. What do you consider to be your strengths? We all have our favorite things, but what do you consider to be your strengths and favorites?
Yeah, when I got started, I was fishing the tidal water, Rappahannock River between the Potomac and the James River here in Virginia, and that's where I learned to fish. So I feel like that. You mentioned two of my better tournaments, Potomac and James River, and I think having learned how to fish on tidal water has helped me there, and also time on the water. There's two bodies of water is important, but I know how difficult it is to learn to fish the tides. I hear a lot of the open anglers talk about learning the tides, and just like anything else, time on the water, is important. But like with the James River, Potomac, it took me probably 4 or 5 years to really learn. My brother and I working together, learn how to run the tides. So that's an important thing, I think, on the James River in particular. During that tournament we just fished, we had a low tide, and you can waste a lot of time if you don't know how to deal with that either low or high tide. When the water's not moving, you gotta adjust. So I think that's something I would consider a strength. Even just fishing in tidal water. My husband and I fished with John Cruz on Smith Mountain Lake years ago, and he was sharing some techniques and stuff with us. And we saw my husband and I both fishing with our rod, kind of from a, level with the water to, straight up and down technique. And he said, "You guys are river fishing." And I'm like, that's something that's really stuck with me, learning that. He's, talked to me about, using your body for momentum when you're setting the hook and changing the angle that if you're dragging, like a Carolina rig or something like that, Texas rig. But just the way you fish on tidal water is different, because the way that the current will pull your lure around. So just those little nuances, take a long time to learn. So I think fishing tidal water is a strength. Of course, the open don't go to many tidal water fisheries. So
I was going to interrupt you a second. Let me ask you a question, because we have the Delta out here. It's a ways from where I am, but the Delta is it's that way. It's tidal, and it's so frustrating. Let me pick your brain on this as a tidal water expert. Do you settle and fish the low tide, for example, or do you run somewhere where there's a better tide? And if you do fish the low tide, how do you get them?
Sure. I stay away from low tide and high tide.
Yeah.
So, for me, I believe, and it's probably true on the Delta too, I'd love to fish there sometime. But I think there's the fish are very programmed to feed at certain times of the tide, and low tide, from my experience, is not one of them. However, it depends on where you are and what technique you're fishing. So my brother and I fishing, low tide, low outgoing, but not dead low tide. You know, that's the fish will position, you know, on wood a lot. And, you know, some of that wood pattern at the end of low tide can be really deadly. But when the tide stops moving, so I'll either go chase outgoing tide further down river, or, you know, move up and start fishing in tide.
So I mean, it's okay if the tide is low as long as it's either moving or I mean, if it's falling or rising. Low tide's okay.
Yeah.
But when it stops, that's when the fish stop.
Yeah, that's from my experience. Yeah.
No, I mean that's been my experience too. It's just I usually don't realize that until it's too late.
Yeah, well, you know, if you're fun fishing, you can wait it out. But if you're in a tournament, you need to optimize your time. So you got to go to where the fish bite.
The new Frantic by Trophy Bass Baits is a 3-piece segmented glide style swim bait. They call it that because, well, it's frantic. Check them out by going to @SwimBaitsPlus. You know, let's talk about the James River in the recent Northern Open. How did you get your fish in that event?
So yeah, I think probably 3/4 of the field, I would bet, went to the Chickahominy River, and you know, they stocked that river with Florida strain bass years ago, and it's been an incredible success story. A lot of those fish are taken from the Chickahominy River up to Osborne or to some of the other places on the James. So they've moved some of those better fish to different parts of the river. But a lot of the rivers really, I mean, there are areas of it where the spawn is really good and stuff, but it's far away from there. But, you know, the Chickahominy River has everything a bass would want. It's a real treasure for us to have here in Virginia. We've got cypress trees, lily pads, arrowhead pads, anything hydrilla, milfoil, which I prefer over hydrilla. There's so many opportunities in different places you can fish on that river. So I went to the Chickahominy River both days, and even though the tide wasn't ideal for my case, because the low tide was right, you know, mid-morning, I thought, you know, the fish were spawning, so I thought, or some fish were spawning. I thought I, you know, could maybe find some of those fish in the you know, and some of the feeder creeks on wood. And I didn't really even practice that. Didn't really pan out for me, but I ended up catching my fish on cypress knees and arrowhead pads and in just those spawning areas and real shallow water. I was in less than 4 feet of water.
So you think your fish that you caught were spawning fish?
They were either staging or spawning.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think I caught a couple post-spawn fish, but the majority of them, the better fish I caught were staging spawn. They were feeding. And, you know, we had a lot of northwest wind prior to the tournament and some really strong winds 2 weeks prior that I feel like pushes a lot of the water out of that river system. And I think those fish wait to spawn until the water level kind of stabilizes. If you get an east wind and, you know, push those fish up into the right places. And I think a lot of them wait to spawn until, you know, a lot of that really nasty spring weather is kind of calmed down.
Can we just say this right now that I don't think that there is a tougher division to fish or level of fishing than the Opens or say the Toyota Series. I mean, hats off to these anglers that make it to the elites and to the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour and all this. But gosh, the fishing is difficult. I mean, you have so many local anglers. You have so many pros that fish the Opens and stuff. It's tough series.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the guys that's fishing the elite now, I was talking to him a couple years ago, and he told me the elites are so much easier than the Opens. And it makes sense. You know, you got in the Open, the James River Open, we had 226 boats, I think, registered. I think about 225 fished it. There's a lot of places to fish on that river, and it really didn't fish small, but it can. You know, some of the lakes we go to and stuff, they definitely will fish small. So it's like, you know, you think about the way they flip the field. You know, if you're like in Douglas, I was in the think I was boat like 30 or something on the first day. And I never started I got through the line and shut down my outboard and started fishing. And so then the second day, I'm one of the last boats. So I knew, and there's so much strategy you have to factor into it in the open, because I knew darn well that I wouldn't have those fish would be picked over by the time I got to them on the second day. So I had to have a strategy plan to account for that. But definitely nothing tougher in my mind than fishing. But there are some team trails that are also equally competitive, I think. The one my brother and I fish here in Virginia is called Virginia Elite 70. And there's 77 teams. And they're all, from the region. And they're just hammers after hammer, and to finish in the money in that trail is probably just as tough as it is to go.
I can understand that.
I was going to share something. So my husband and I used to fish as a team. Our neighbors, where we used to live, every time we come home from a tournament, the neighbor would say, "Did you win?" And it to us, because, you know how difficult it is to win. So just placing in the money is difficult enough to win. So it's just, she'd ask them, "Did you win?" And I was like, "Yeah, I won." Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I was going against the fish, and we got him. We got
the fish all day, so we won.
Right. So you have fished a lot of opens in recent years. I mean, you've been in. I mean, every time I check open results, there's your name. And is the goal to make the Elite Series?
Yeah, I mean, that's always there. I know the reality of it, how challenging it is to get there. And I was talking to someone this spring about that. I'm a realist. I feel like if I was going to qualify for the Elite Series, it probably would have happened already. But I'm not being defeatist. I know how hard it is, and it's almost like the stars have to align, right? I heard Joey. I was listening to Joey's podcast we did this morning, and the way he described the way he felt going into that tournament that he recently won was at Pala.
Yeah.
And he didn't have any expectations of winning, and I think that's when some of our best tournaments happen. When we really don't go in with any putting that kind of pressure on ourselves, and that's something I've had to. I learned something at every tournament, and really, not putting that pressure on myself has helped me kind of take my game, I think, to the next level a little bit, because I used to beat myself up a lot. And I think as you grow and you get some wisdom from time on the water and just doing it, you realize you don't need to beat yourself up over it. It'll come when the time's right, and yeah, that's still a thing. And if it happens, I don't think that far ahead. It's one tournament at a time, and so if I get lucky enough to qualify at some point, I'm going to take full advantage of it.
It's so interesting, because I talked to so many anglers, and some of them are, "Oh yeah, that's the goal. We got to make the elites," and then you go, wow, there's a lot of factors that go into making that. And I mean, the very least is getting the fish to bite, and beyond that, there's so many other things that, I mean, we have lives too. I mean, we have to pay mortgages. We have to do all these things. So, and the ones, like you said, like Joey, who just kind of like are going along and whatever happens. And, if I happen to make it, then to kind of free your mind and not hold that over yourself as like
put that pressure on yourself.
Right.
Yeah. You hear people say, it's got to be this year. I got to do it this year. Really putting a lot of pressure on themselves, and I understand that. Financially, that's such a major factor. And like you said, other things that are happening, like different pressure and stuff that factor in. But people like Joey, he is an incredibly good fisherman, and you always see his name at the top, quarter percentile or whatever. But there's so many of those stories that exist. It's just there's so many opportunities there.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you, because this is a fascinating thing to me, is we are in this new age of electronics. And I wanted to ask you, where are you on the Panoptix live scope spectrum? Because I mean, there are neophytes like myself who are just starting to see this, and I mean, I'm going, man, this is just changing the way I'm even thinking now. And there are people that really, have put it to use to win tournaments and so on. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
When I ordered my boat, I got lucky enough to get a deal with Mass Pro Shops this year, and so the Garmin Panoptix was just coming out as an order for my boat, and so I didn't even know the Lowrance was that close to being available. I'm a Lowrance person, so I ordered the Garmin to go along with the Panoptix, and my brother, who we fish as a team, he went to with the Lowrance, came out shortly after I got my boat, and so we're testing the two this year since we fish a lot of the same bodies of water. We'll take my boat, take his boat, and we're comparing the two. When my first tournament with it was Hartwell last year, I think, in Cherokee, and I didn't really play with it very much. I had so much to learn about those lakes. I'd never been to either one before. So at Harris Chain, though, I had already, I've had the winter to spend some time smallmouth fishing here in Virginia and getting familiar with it. And I was so fascinated on the Harris Chain, fishing in 4 feet or less in pads. I love fishing pads. And fishing the same places that I fished before. I've been to the Harris Chain probably 5 times or so. And seeing these torpedoes under the pads with these balls of bait and just really getting a picture of what we already kind of knew was there, but seeing it, it kind of makes the hair stand up on your arms just thinking about how many fish are in there. They still didn't bite, but it did, it was a factor for me. So it's easy to get mesmerized by watching that and learning the behavior of the fish and trying to make them bite, looking at them on the screen. It's fascinating. Have a ton to learn on it. I have caught a few fish, looking at them on an Alabama rig, just playing around last winter and stuff. Jerk bait, that's pretty fun. Drop shot, not so much, but definitely jerk bait on Alabama rig. I think, again, it's time on the water. The guys that do really well catching fish using that, they spend a lot of time on it. So, but yeah, I'm learning and I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, I am. I mean, I think it's such an evolution in the sport.
Definitely.
It's such a tool in everybody's boat now.
Yeah, it is. And you think about I was talking to Rick Emmett about this too. I think he's coaching one of the college teams.
Yeah.
We were talking about the electronics and how interesting it might be to take some of the kids, in college teams and stuff, and take all of their electronics away from them and see how they would do with instinctive fishing, right? I think there's something there,
I think Randy Blockett would agree with that.
Yeah, I think so too.
I've enjoyed watching his evolution through this process because he and I are from the same era, and we fish visually and this whole idea of video game stuff is kind of scary.
Yeah, my husband, it's funny, we're hooking these electronics up this winter and stuff, and we're going through and setting everything up, and he said, at what point do you just start fishing? At what point do you put the lure in the water? But yeah.
I smell a rat. Do you want to get in on the rat swim bait craze? Check out You Dirty Rat by Trophy Bass Baits, available at Swim Baits Plus. Visit their Instagram account at Swim Baits Plus and find out what the noise is all about. I got to ask you this question because I've done a little research on this. And is it true that on more than one occasion you have told your co-angler that they're going to need to remove the hooks from the fish because you don't like to touch them?
The reaction to that is one thing, but when I ask them to tie my knots for me and bait my hooks, that's yeah. No, the guys definitely, my co-anglers definitely don't know what to expect going into a day fishing with me on pro-am tournaments. And I love watching the way that plays out. Usually it's well, we'll address the bathroom situation first thing, either the day before or in the morning while we're waiting to launch. And you can see a kind of a sigh of relief when I say, just do like you would do if you were fishing with a guy, no big deal. And but then it's usually like after our run to our first spot where they're like, I can just see them kind of relax because they're like, oh, this girl can drive a boat, so I think there are a lot of guys who don't really know what to expect, but I've had some really, really memorable times fishing with my co-anglers.
That's good stuff. I wanted to ask you.
I have thought about asking them to take like a giant catfish off my line. I haven't actually done it.
I wanted to ask you about the WBT. You fished the inaugural season, and I really would like to, because it seems like you just never hear about it. I think it was an important part of the sport. I don't think you're old enough to remember Bass and Gals.
I am. I was a young single mother when I started learning about Bass and Gals, and I really wanted to go fish them, but I couldn't justify the expense. I was in Virginia, and a lot of their events were out in the south.
Well, I just think there's a lot of important history there, and I was wondering if you could share some thoughts, some memories, experiences from the Women's Bass Tour.
Sure, absolutely. My brother and my husband and I went to the Bassmaster Classic in Pittsburgh, and that was the year I got married. And we saw the Women's Bassmaster work like kiosks at the expo, and that was the first I heard of it. And so we're walking around, and they're both talking about the possibilities, and my husband said, "You just have to do it." So he went with me to the inaugural event. We drove his guest, Howard Dodge Ram, and his boat to Texas. And I had very little experience running the boat until then. I had a bit, enough to be safe. And so I fished every event from then on. But I remember meeting, I think at the Classic, it was Kathy Majors, and I don't remember who else was there at the kiosk. I wish I did, but meeting those girls and getting to know the serious competitors that existed that came from Bass and Gals. A lot of them knew each other already, so I kind of was like, had to get to know them. But I loved watching the fierce competition. Sherry Glasgow stands out in my mind. I remember running on the Red River, and I was trying to catch her, but she was, she was on her way to something. She was wide open going down the river, and I loved watching the way she conducted herself, and she just won so much. Pam Martin Wells, same way. Diana Clark, Penny Berryman, she's really a good memory I have. The first tournament of the inaugural event was at Louisville, and then the following year, the first tournament was at Neely Henry. And I met Penny in the parking lot of the hotel, and we talked a little bit. She was very nice. And the next morning, tournament morning, I had a knock on my door at like 4 o'clock in the morning. It was her, and she was just making sure I was awake. So that was so cool, so thoughtful, and people like her, Kathy Majors, and some of the other, ladies I met there really just wanted to see everybody succeed. But the competition was fierce for sure. And I feel fortunate to have been able to fish with so many legends in the sport. Having the ESPN backing it and Bassmaster trying to make it work for so many years was wonderful. I know that when they announced that the women would get a spot in the Bassmaster Classic, that's when I think we started to see fall off, because there was a lot of controversy around that. Everybody was clapping. I was in the back shaking my head. And that's not the right thing. So unfortunately, I think a lot about why we don't have more females at the open level. And I think, like you said earlier, family obligations and things like that factor in. But I love seeing the new girl, Brianna Tucker, she fished the Southern Opens this year. I saw her on the water in practice, and I didn't realize she was fishing the tournament. She's young. I think she's right out of college, and I love seeing that. But I just keep thinking these college teams, some of these girls that are fishing at the college level are going to fish the Opens, and I've been waiting to see it happen. So always want to welcome them and encourage them, because it can be isolating as a female in the sport.
Yeah. I can see that. I love your perspective on this. I go quite a ways back. I mean, the '80s with the Bassin Gals, and I it's funny. I look back to those days, and I think what people were doing was, I think it was about promoting women in the sport of bass fishing. I think that's what they were telling themselves, but I think it was more about protecting men in those days. In other words, these women to come in and fish men's events, I think they would have taken some money from these guys. I mean, Penny Berryman was an amazing angler. Lucy Mize, she and her husband used to drive around the country with their double deck trailer.
Yeah,
these were some really good anglers, and I think it was. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's 25 years in the future, and I'm looking back at this, and I'm thinking, that a lot of that might have been about protecting the men.
I can't forget to mention again Kathy Major. When I first started, she was really instrumental, I think, in getting the women's Bassmaster Tour started. She was one of many who were Sugar Ferris, who I never got to meet. I heard a lot of stories about these the Bassin Gal days, but Kathy Majors was absolutely always there and available to me. She wanted me to. She could see how badly I wanted to make this work, and I knew I had to get sponsorship if I was going to do it, justify the expense. And she was always there for me. So definitely, people like that, they just wanted, like you said, they wanted women to have the opportunity to be successful in the sport. But I had never thought about it that way. Maybe they were protecting the guys. I definitely see something.
I just, this is something that I think about, and I was thinking about this morning. I know, it wasn't something that you and I had discussed, and I thought, that there's a lot of things that we see today, companies that are promoting certain things, but they're using slaves over here, and and I'm just thinking, what a great outward message. We're here to promote the women. We're really here to protect the man. I don't know what kind of trouble I'm going to get in for saying that, but anyway.
No, that's the other thing, I think as I was starting to fish competitively, we were in this, sexual harassment was such a, amazing topic. I mean, I remember at work, a shift from where people could be friendly with each other to guys not even wanting to make contact with women at the office. So, I mean, they are, and now with social media, trying to think of how to say some of the things I want to say on that topic, but there are women who kind of ruin it for the rest of us.
Oh yeah.
And when I started, we didn't have social media pressure, because that's what it is, but we did have that element, and it existed where there were women that were competing with us who were there for the wrong reasons and were trying to, it loved the attention, let's put it that way, and they got it, but it also makes it more difficult for people like us, people like Trey, Brianna, Melinda Mize, to be taken seriously. Now.
Trade calls him kissy face, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, she does.
And, when I remember distinctly when sponsorship or pro staff applications shifted from asking for your resume content to asking for your social media following, likes and followers, And so the pressure's there, and that element still exists. So it's still a challenge. So, I think I always wonder, some of the guys don't wonder if we have ulterior motives, and so they keep it at arm's length, and I understand that. I can't blame them.
Oh, we are opening a whole can of worms here because that you're right. You're right. I mean, gosh, what I really wanted to ask this question today, and obviously from a size standpoint and a strength standpoint, you can see why there's a women's golf tour and a women's tennis tour. But do you think there is a need for a female bass fishing tour, or should it just be head to head with everybody?
I love the way you ask that question and the way you describe it. So there are definitely some challenges that exist. And I think, it does have to do with strength, but it also has to do with maybe generationally how we were raised and, the expectations that exist, whatever. But, I know when I started, I had breakdowns on the water, and I'm a troubleshooter. And I mechanically inclined. I like figuring things out and stuff. So that's helped me a lot, knowing how to troubleshoot issues on the water and stuff. But generally, I know we have the service trailers there, and a lot of people depend on them. I can't tell you the number of flat tires and stuff I've had on the road, traveling to 27-hour drive to Texas, going on the boat by myself, So there are differences, but I think those challenges are no different for a guy than they are for a girl. Safety concerns, right? If you're traveling alone like that, that's a concern. But I don't think ultimately that there needs to be a separate tour, because those problems and those challenges exist regardless of whether you're fishing a women's tour or the opens. But with that said, I think I've met a ton of women who, like, at every weigh-in, it seems like there's at least one, maybe a couple of women who are just grinning from ear to ear when they see me pull in. They're clapping for me at the weigh-in, and I make it a point to try to talk to them. And a lot of them are interested. They want to fish tournaments, but they're apprehensive about it for various reasons. Oh, yeah. And so that's where I think an LDAA or a women's tour is perfectly logical. It's a venue for people who aren't comfortable fishing, competing against the guys, you know. So I think it's definitely got its place. I don't think it makes sense to have a classic spot for a women's tour. But other than that, that has to do with the expenses, right? The amount of money that the elites have to put in to get to the classic, and that people in the opens, those small number of opportunities that exist each year, that was probably one of the things that frustrated most with WPT days. Our entry fees were much lower, right? Yeah.
Well, you said something a few minutes ago that really I hadn't thought about, but I know it's happening, and there are a lot of girls fishing in the college teams, and I've seen Brianna's name in results, and that might be the thing right there, is coming from the college level to, and that's another thing that gets me, male or female. I have never seen so many college educated professional anglers. I mean, back in the day, it was very primitive, and people were living out of station wagons and things like that. And without the business savvy and so on. And I think that one thing that the college ranks has really done is really educated these younger anglers. And, for female anglers, I think there's an avenue there.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think one of the big things that I believe that the coaches are teaching these young people is maybe more important if you are going to be a tournament angler than how to catch fish, and that's how to conduct yourself off the water.
Yeah.
Right. In pursuing sponsorships, but also, YouTube videos and social media, really thinking about your reputation and the impact on the sport of how every angler conducts themselves. So I think that is an avenue. And, I think it starts at high school, here in Virginia.
Right.
Becky Gore started, do you know Becky Gore?
I don't, that name isn't familiar, but you're right about the high schools.
Yeah, she started a fishing club here in Virginia, Orange County. I think it was one of the first high school clubs in the country, I believe, at least in our area. But I think getting to the kids at that age, in the high school level, and really trying to help them by, I have a ton of stuff. I strategically blocked my shelf back there because it's such a mess. But the spring has been a whirlwind of tournaments. But I've got so much stuff every year left over that, I'm not going to use, so I donate it to the high school. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, getting the equipment in the hands of the kids to help them be successful. And then really just being there. I mean, there's so many high school events I hear about that kids are left on the bank because they don't have a boat, to take them out. And that's a shame. We've got, how many anglers do we have in the country? Right. We can't accommodate, 10 kids who want to go fishing. That's where we need to improve, I think, and then finding those, Trait and I talk about, the responsibility of being a role model, because girls, if they see us doing it, then they maybe will think that it's something they can do too. So we want to take that seriously and make sure that we are good role models for those girls and make ourselves available to them, So, that's why I mentioned Brianna. It's on the water. I really wish I'd gotten to meet her, because I know when I started in the WBT, even, I didn't really necessarily feel like I belonged. And that's with a bunch of women. So it took some time to get to know some of the people, right? So I just really want to make sure that we know we need to welcome the girls and help them make sure they understand the difference between the kind of feedback they might get from the kids' face, social media versus the right kind of feedback, right? Right. So that they don't screw up their reputations. Right.
Well, what does the rest of the year look like for Christy Bradley?
Well, my husband retired 2 days ago.
Oh, that's trouble.
Yes, he retired from Lockheed Martin. Wow. He worked there almost 40 years, straight out of tech school, and has worked, busted his butt his whole life, and so he's earned a nice retirement. So he's going to be spending some time, traveling. He's got some hunting property up in Pennsylvania. Hopefully, I'll get to do a little bit of that with him, and so adjusting to that life. I'll be fishing. I've got another tournament on the James River this weekend. My brother and I have a team tournament there, so we're going to go win that. And then my next tournament, my next open is not until September. Lake Norman. So I wish I could fish the other two Northern Opens, because I think that would be a really great opportunity for me to maybe qualify for the States after that first tournament. But I just don't have the vacation time. So, that's the catch-22 for me. I wish I could just retire or, quit my job and just go all in with fishing. Because I do think that's another part of it. If you don't have the luxury of being able to devote most of your time to it, then, it makes it harder to do. So a couple more team tournaments, and then that open in the fall, and a trip to the beach.
Very good. Well, Christy Bradley, I've really enjoyed having you on the Bass Pro Anglers podcast today. I got a feeling we're going to talk more often, because there's a lot more things to talk about. Sure.
I appreciate the time, and I appreciate you having me on.
Well, we can't go too long on these because attention spans, you know.
Yeah, right. Yes.
But we would definitely talk again, and thanks for being with us, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Best of luck to you.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
All right.
Young man, take a look at me now.